At the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, I became aware of people's concerns and stress. People were writing to me from all over the world looking for answers, and I wanted to answer them. And so I did so by gathering experts. I interviewed experts on business development, investment strategies, relationship dynamics, family dynamics, and of course, health principles. And I published those interviews as Thrive Time. You're about to hear a powerful flashback from the Thrive Time series, an interview recorded during the COVID-19 pandemic. While the world was navigating uncertainty, I was diving into conversations that brought clarity, health, and empowerment. Let's revisit one of those vital moments now. Hi, welcome back to another episode here. My name is Eric Edmeades. I'm your host, and I'm very excited, as I always am when I bring people onto the show. But today I'm particularly excited to be bringing to you guys a really good friend of mine, Daniel Priestley. And I want you to know that it is actually people like Daniel Priestley that inspired me to want to create this show in the first place for a number of reasons. There are a number of people in my life where I sit and have conversations with them, and afterward I think, wow, people could have benefited from eavesdropping on this conversation. And Daniel is definitely one of the people that I've had many conversations like that over the years with. And so now here we have the opportunity for you to eavesdrop in on the conversation. The other reason is that I'm excited to have Daniel here is Daniel has a first-rate mind and he sees patterns and he watches what happens with history, with the economics. And so as a consequence of that, I think he's going to give us some really interesting insights into entrepreneurship and how to evolve and reinvent ourselves during this time. Daniel's the developer of the phenomenally successful and effective Key Person of Influence program. He's a multi-best-selling author of a number of books, including Oversubscribed. And just genuinely, he's a really good guy. Daniel, thank you so much for being here.
I'm thrilled to be on your show. When you sent through the invitation, it was the highlight of my day. It was really cool.
I appreciate it. I love that you dressed up and shaved for it too. Oh wait, that was a different show. This is
lockdown. This is my lockdown uniform.
I like it. So let's jump in with a couple of things here. You posted something the other day that's very in line with stuff I've seen you speak about in the conversations you and I've had in the past. And you talked about, recession really being a time of reinvention. So maybe let's give a little overview of what you mean by that.
Yeah, so there tends to be two phases to a recession, which is the reset and the reinvention. So you end up with a shock, some sort of a shock to the economy. And what happens after that is there's typically a reset phase followed by a reinvention phase where people reinvent themselves. Now, for big companies, the FTSE 100 or the S&P 500, the reset phase can last something like 18 months. If you look at the big recession in the early 2000, it was about 2 years from top to bottom. If you look at the 2008 recession, the global financial crisis, it was actually kind of the high was November 2007, and it went right down for about 18 months. It was a big downward spike. So the reset phase is all about cutting back to original first principles or core concepts, getting back to your highest value, rediscovering vision, mission, and values, cutting away stuff that's not aligned to values. If I speak quite plainly, for large corporate world, the reset is offloading people, offloading jobs, cutting back on costs, cutting non-core businesses. And then the reinvention phase is essentially innovating, coming up with new ideas, thinking about the economy or the world in a different way. And there's only a small number of events that have this kind of an impact. 9/11 was one of them. Life was never the same after 9/11. There was before 9/11 and then after 9/11. A lot of what we think of as now just normal part of the vernacular of sort of terror, war on terror, surveillance, all of that sort of stuff was post 9/11. The global financial crisis, the way we feel about our financial institutions and the way we have a distrust and the bailout and all of that kind of stuff came in because of that. So this is, we're living through a historic event. This is going to be on the same kind of scale as a massive global reset, which will then require a massive global reinvention.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about what all of that stuff's great at a high level to understand what's going on at a high level. And then there's the practical realities of some people right now are thinking that it's the end of the world economically and all that kind of stuff. Meanwhile, Papa John's just advertised that they're trying to hire 20,000 drivers right now. Like some industries are clearly going to go into a very strong reset mode in a downsizing kind of capacity. But there are many businesses like Zoom, for example, that are going to be thriving during these times.
Exactly.
A lot of your clients, like through Key Person of Influence, are very similar to ours. You're talking about the small to medium-sized business owner or the creator or the industry thought leader, what have you. They have a business that is maybe not a big corporate, and they're going to be facing some of those same things. What I'm curious about from your perspective is, okay, look, when the last big recession hit, which is not far off of when we first kind of met, not long after that, I think, The fact is, it didn't really affect me at all. I had just sold my business. I was largely in cash. I had some money in the stock market. I had taken a lot of it out to buy a house, and it hit, and it wasn't that big a deal. I watched everybody around panicking and so on. This time around, 15 full-time staff, live event calendar, absolutely full. It's a whole different world out there. So talk to me about what you're telling your clients at this point. Like, what are some of the emergency steps they can take to not only survive, but let's be really clear. And I think you and I are, if I think about the people that are way past wanting to survive this, that are truly seeing the opportunity, wanting to thrive, what are some of the immediate steps that they would take?
Can I stay not high level, but mid level, and we'll get our way down into grassroots? So the mid level is this. In the late 2010s, the FTSE 100 was going like that. At the same time, the economy was flat. And what that basically means is that large companies are taking opportunities from small companies, right? They've run out of economic growth, so they're competing in the economy. There's not alchemy, there's competition going on. And when big companies are growing at 7 or 8 or 9% and the economy is only growing like this, it means that, let me talk in really practical terms. I run business accelerators. And one thing that really frustrated me in 2018 is every bank started running a business accelerator. Every large consulting firm, every accounting firm started running a business accelerator. And they're all doing this kind of like, they're just flooding the market with all these training programs. It's not their core business. It's an opportunistic thing that they think they should do. One of them does it and then they all do it and all this sort of stuff. And actually, here's the mental picture I love to put in people's heads. Imagine the big companies, they've got this cookie jar or a biscuit tin if you're in the UK, and they're putting all the biscuits into the biscuit tin, and they put the big ones in first, and then they start putting all the other biscuits in the biscuit tin. And actually, they've locked up a lot of the economy in those big companies. Along comes an event like this, shakes up that biscuit tin and tips it out on the table. The big companies, the first thing they do is they go straight back to their core business. If you're KPMG, you go back to auditing and accounting for the biggest 500 companies in the economy. You cut away everything that's not core business and you protect the core business. And what happens is that 10 million, 20 million, 5 million, $100 million business opportunities get left on the table for entrepreneurs to pick up if they want to.
Right.
I know for you, last recession, you picked up an incredible film and television business, a media business. Yep. That's a classic example of what big companies do. It's how they think. They just simply say, what is the bulk of our revenue? What makes up 80% of our revenue? Everything else goes. And that's what they're doing in the reset. Now, what that does is it creates enormous opportunities for entrepreneurs to pick up, whether through competition, innovation, or actually acquisition, to pick up huge chunks of multi-million-dollar parts of the business, of the economy that's now floating around out there without a home. And it's an amazing opportunity for entrepreneurs. If you're entrepreneurial, this is actually heaven, because when the biggest companies in the economy are going like that, unless the economy is growing at the same pace, you're actually looking at the big companies taking opportunities from everyone else. In 2008-9, I bet you a lot that Vodafone or any of the big telecommunications companies, they had a little VoIP division where they would have been experimenting with 100 engineers working on something that looks like WhatsApp. And they would have been testing it, but it didn't make any money. It didn't pay anyone's payroll. So Vodafone would have gone, forget about that VoIP thing, forget about that like app phone idea that we've got. We don't know how the hell that would make any money. So we're just going to scrap that. And let's imagine a big company like Vodafone, they just cut off all of that and they go back to their core business of traditional telecommunications. Well, guess what? They missed WhatsApp. That was a $19 billion sale, and it has massively transformed the nature of telecommunications. In a decade, no one even thinks about long distance phone calls costing anything. And that is the type of thing that happens during these events or post these events. And I'm going to make a prediction. And the prediction is the very first company that goes from zero to $1 trillion valuation will happen this decade. Somewhere in the 2020s, there will be a startup, and it will, by the end of the 2020s, by 2030, it will be tipping $1 trillion valuation. We've got 5G coming into the marketplace. We've got new technology, Internet of Things, AI, machine learning. All of that's coming in to disrupt everything. We've just had the most incredible disruption event. Someone somewhere out there in the world right now is sitting there at their home with 3 months on their hands without a job to start coding, to start playing, to start researching, to start connecting the dots. And there's going to be a dozen multi-billion-dollar companies that start. There'll be thousands or tens of thousands of multi-million-dollar companies that start. There is going to be a wave of entrepreneurship that is caused by this reset moment that we've just experienced.
You know, it's funny. I mean, I've considered myself an entrepreneur largely since I was about 9, I guess. But one of the things that's always amazed me as I've traveled around the world speaking about business is that one of the key differences between somebody who finds their way out into the world of entrepreneurship and somebody who chooses to take a job is that they say, I enjoy the security of it. And unfortunately, a lot of people are seeing that right now. I imagine we're going to see massive furloughs in the airline industry. We're going to see, all kinds of that kind of stuff happening at the moment, showing us that being employed by somebody else is not necessarily great security. But the great news about that is that false security has imprisoned a lot of people in a time for money employee relationship when their creativity really could have been inspired to do something really big. I know that my brother, for example, brilliant mind, he created Twitter long before there was Twitter, but he had a job. Like really, he created microblogging long before there was Twitter. I remember him doing this, like, why are you telling me you're shopping? Like you're shopping at the store right now. But the thing is, I think a lot of times in his life, he's been in a place where he's had a job and he's got kids to take care of and what have you. And all of a sudden now, I think he's still working quite hard, but all of a sudden now I think he's looking at it differently. Like, wow, this is a time for creation. This is a time for reinvention. And I really love the way you put that. It's powerful.
Something is happening right now that has never happened before, which is millions of employees across the UK and probably everywhere else in the world as well. Millions of employees across the UK suddenly have 2,500 a month coming in for the next 3 months and nothing to do. And they can't even leave the house. So they can't go get drunk. They can't go hang out in a restaurant. They can't go walk around the park. They got to sit around thinking.
And there's only so much stuff on Netflix.
There's going to be plenty of people who binge watch Netflix. Happen, but there's going to be some people who are sitting there going, maybe now's the moment to start my startup. Maybe now's the moment to, connect with a small team online and find out who's passionate about this thing that I geek out on all the time.
Yeah.
There's this whole other world that you and I aren't really connected into much. And there's a couple of places that I doubt you spend much time. I don't spend any time, but there's World of Warcraft and there's Minecraft. And right now there are 20-year-olds, 18, 19-year-olds who are building these incredible structures in communities on these virtual worlds. There's also TikTok, incredible media people, all right? So one of the things TikTok is doing, it's educating 1 billion young people how to edit, how to make engaging content, how to create something that goes viral in a good way. We are about to have this wave of young people who are very media savvy. They know how to communicate powerfully, very community, they form teams online just naturally because that's what they've been doing. And now millions of people with time on their hands, enough money to survive. This is going to be one hell of a magical time. The other side of this is going to produce scientists. A lot of scientists are going to do their research during this period of time. We're going to have a scientific boom because people are going to be inspired to get into medicine and biology, and they're going to see that the heroes are not the hedge fund managers and the Instagram influencers who can take a photo next to a jet. But the heroes are actually going to be the people who stepped up to this challenge, and that's going to cause a scientific boom. You're also going to see people sitting there going, wow, we now have the climate science that we need. We're going to be able to actually see what happens when you ground most of the airplanes.
Yeah.
I personally cannot believe how clean the air is. And I've got birds, beautiful birds, coming and nesting in my garden. And I've never seen these beautiful birds before. And it's only been a week. We've got bugs that are flying up in the air, which never are there. And silent. You can hear the birds chirping at night. And nature is actually behaving differently already. And we're going to be able to measure that. Maybe that's going to be the catalyst for addressing some of our environmental issues as well. So there's going to be phenomenal reinvention off the back of this.
I had a big group of people on a live call with me a couple of days ago, and I asked them if any of them were having fun. And they're all like, well, yeah. And I said, any of you feel guilty about having fun? Yeah. And, they feel guilty about it because, it's socially responsible to be serious right now and socially responsible to be afraid. And I'm like, no, that's not socially responsible at all. This is just a big adventure and some incredible life change can be facilitated right now. I think on the last show I was doing, I came up with this sort of crazy metaphor, but I was like, I think everybody should be in their mind designing their COVID-19 montage. And what I mean by that is that you remember Rocky, he's got to go fight Drago, but we don't have 6 months to watch him train. So they make a montage, right? He's pulling the thing and he can't pull it at first, but then he can pull it a little further, and then he can pull it, and he does it all the whole thing. And I'm saying, I think everybody should start creating their COVID-19 montage of how they lived this next few weeks, months.
How they put up 3 kilos.
How to take them off or put them on the right way up top with but that montage can include things like working out and eating well and the code, reading books and building a business. And your clarity on why those opportunities are going to be there, because they are.
Yeah, they really will. And so the head start that entrepreneurs have in this is that big companies are going to take 18 months to 2 years to reset. It's going to happen in waves for those big companies, stock market, then making layoffs, then collapses and M&A and all that sort of stuff. The entrepreneurs have a head start. And the entrepreneurs, in fact, I ran a poll today on one of my groups, and 80% of people, are you in reset, which means that you're dealing with a world of crap. You're trying to cut things out. You're trying to find the bottom. You're trying to find where you need to, you're dealing with frustration and panic. Or are you in reinvention? You hit rock bottom, and now you're actually creative. You've got clarity of thought. Your heart's open. Your intuition's clean. Your mindset is broad. Which way are you feeling? And of my entrepreneur community, I'd say 80% are in reinvention mode already. Their mind is open. Their heart is open. Their gut is tuned in, and they're ready to go. And that's how you know you're ready for reinvention.
Yeah.
The ideas come flowing naturally. And you don't have this closed, fearful heart. You kind of have this open emotion. And then you have this kind of like intuition about what would be good timing and all of that. So when I explained it to my community, they just immediately stepped up and said, yeah, we're ready to reinvent. And then we're going through a set of steps as to how to reinvent. So there's actually a reinvention set of steps. Broadly speaking, entrepreneurs, you essentially have to come up with a concept and a value proposition, and then you have to become an influencer, run some campaigns, formalize some digital assets, and then focus on developing a team that gets better every quarter. And it's like we've got the steps all nicely mapped out, and we're just going through and we're saying, okay, let's start with the concept and the value proposition. And we're discussing what makes a good concept, what makes a good value proposition. We're just moving through those steps. And it's wonderful because it's kind of like we were all at different levels in business, but now we're all starting from the same place. It's wonderful. We're all reinventing our businesses at the same time.
And there are many opportunities to do that. There's suddenly demand in areas where there wasn't demand before. The demand for example, online education is bigger than it's ever been before. Every kid is being taught online at the moment. Obviously, that's going to begin to happen. We're going to see a lot more of that type of demand as this stretches out. And we don't know how long this is going to last. But then even after it's done, people will think differently, and there will be different demands and different opportunities. And I love the thinking, corporates will scale back. It'll take them time to rejig and what have you. And those of us that are nimble and quick and have the right people in our networks that can make stuff happen, real opportunity. Let's just talk about people in reset for a moment. You got your business owner, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 12 employees, let's say in that category. Their business is kind of fallen off a cliff right now. There's a lot of uncertainty for them. What's your thoughts for them in terms of, okay, what do they need to do in the next 2 weeks? And then how do they start evaluating what opportunities they can go after?
You need to protect your business from going under so that you have a business to go forward with. Either that, or you have to make the decision and say it's going under, so I'm going to end it as best I can. The basic rule of thumb that I have around entrepreneurial team sizes, and it's based on the British military, which is a 400-year track record of HR experiments. And basically, the British military teams people up in team sizes of 2, 4, 8, and then 36. So this is called a scout team, a fire team, which is 4, a section, which is 8, or a platoon, which is 36. And one of the things that I encourage entrepreneurs, bigger entrepreneurs, when I'm talking to entrepreneurs who are actually got a bigger size business, is you need to drop down a team size. If you're anywhere under 36, you probably need to be 8. If you're somewhere around 8 or 9 or 10, you might need to be 4. If you're 4 or 5, you might need to be 2. It could be temporary. It could be that you do that for 3 months. You furlough the staff. You come up with a strategy where you absolutely minimize cost. But it's a common thing that I question my entrepreneurs on, which is, what does the business look like at the next team size down? So if we said we're going to drop from a platoon down to a section, who is your pick of 8? And then who do you put on the bench and bring them back when the time is right? The next thing is you want to go looking for anything that does not impact the customer experience at all. For example, if you've got offices, cancel it. It doesn't impact, if customers don't come into your offices and that's not a big part of the experience, even though you love your offices and you spent that time painting them and decorating them and all that sort of stuff, shelve it. They got to go. You do have to make some hard decisions. If ever you've known a friend who goes through a divorce and they do that thing where they're like still kind of seeing each other and then they're like kind of living together and not, and then they're kind of, we're going to get back together and then we're not going to get back together. And that whole period of time eventually is wasted, and eventually the inevitable happens, and you've kind of you wasted 3 years. And then if sometimes you meet someone who goes, we've made the decision, we're divorcing, we're moving into separate houses, we're splitting things up, we're behaving like adults, and we're just going our separate ways now. And you know that both of those people are probably on a fast track to a more healthy future. So, in many ways, if you do a bit of a hard reset and you just get back to the core value, this is what's important. This is so close to our vision and our mission and our values and our purpose. And then as soon as you cut right back to that vision, mission, values, and core promise of the business and everything else that's not that, there's this great saying by Michelangelo, which is, I look at a block of marble and I see the angel inside and I carve away anything that's not the angel. And it's like, I look at my business and I see the original intention, the vision, mission, values, and I carve away anything that's not that. And that's the reset. And as soon as it's done, it's like an energetic shift like that. Suddenly that afternoon, you go, oh, wow, I've just had a game-changing idea. The speed at which you move into reinvention, if you reset properly, it's fast. It's incredible. And it doesn't have to take weeks or months. It can be some difficult decisions and then you're on the way.
We've really seen that. If I use your example, so, we run a number of businesses, Business Freedom doing business education, WildFit doing food psychology and nutritional coaching, and Speaker Nation training, speaking, and that kind of stuff. So we look at each of those businesses and take a look at like, what is the angel inside? Because frankly, there is fluff around the outsides of them. And so what is the fluff that needs to be carved away? And one of the things we took a look at is, well, if we really get down to what our core assets are, it's IP and capability and an ability to transform people. We've got that capability. Our programs are among the highest rated in any of their classes. We're good at it. But then we have to take a look and go, well, yeah, but nobody wants to get on a plane anymore and everybody's locked in their houses. So we have to cut away outside, cut the rock away. Yeah. And of course, full live event schedule booked up and boom, that business just drops off a cliff, right? But immediately we start to look at internally what's still happening. And so one of the changes that I would suggest any entrepreneur makes right now is where they used to be looking at their reports monthly, they should be looking at them daily. Things will be changing more rapidly. So we started looking at reports daily. And one thing that happened was we were concerned, as people get financially concerned, maybe they stop buying stuff, maybe even the digital business falls off a cliff, who knows? But people kept buying WildFit. They kept looking for help and coaching. Guess why? Because they're home right now and they're dealing with food and they don't want to get fat while they're sitting at home and they want to change things. And so they're still, and I was like, oh, that's not good. No, it's still steaming along. Thank God some years ago, we decided to digitize that program and not make it a personal coaching program like it started. Yeah. And then, we've had similar things happen with, we moved some of our speaking training online and fully sold out one of our workshops in a rejig that took a week. Right? It was just one of these things where we were going to be doing a promotion anyway. And we took this product that we were releasing in 2021, boom, brought it forward, boom, sold out in a week, just last week. So in some areas of our business, we're thriving.
That's a very fluid reset, reinvent. You literally just went, you know what? We're not going to cling to live events. I mean, part of the beauty of this particular event is that the government's made the decision for you. It's like, Eric, you're not getting on the plane. You're not going to the event. In other situations, you might still have it in the back of your head. Maybe I should go. Maybe I should test it. See, so it's kind of like kind of cool that there's certain things that you now can't do. So it forces you into a real hard reset, reinvent phase.
I spent a lot of time working in the film production industry and we got to work on some pretty cool movies, Avatar, Pirates of the Caribbean, that kind of stuff. And consequently, we learned a lot about old stories about movies and stuff. And one of my favorite examples is the contrast between Spielberg making the movie Jaws and George Lucas making the middle three Star Wars movies. When Steven Spielberg was making Jaws, they designed this like big mechanical shark, and the mechanical shark was going to eat people and it was going to be, horrible and what have you. But then they couldn't get the shark to work. So they had to start and the actors were there, the crew was there, and they couldn't get things to work. And so now they're like, well, we got to shoot this scene anyway, but we don't have the shark. Okay, well, why don't we shoot from the shark's perspective? And so now they do that shot, the famous one coming up under the female diver. And so you don't see the shark, you are the shark. Well, we need the shark in this scene. I know what we can do. They harpoon the shark with floating barrels. So the barrels can whip around outside. No shark, just the barrels, which, by the way, is just a blatant stealing of the clock inside the crocodile in Peter Pan, right? Okay. And so now there's the shark. And they finally get the shark to work at the end. And you know what I want to say? In as much as I think that film was an ecological disaster and it was a terrible film in terms of the impact it had on the ecology, if we're simply talking about the economics of it and the quality of the experience, I believe had the shark been working from the beginning, it would have been a shitty B movie. Yeah. But because the shark wasn't working, it drove them into creativity. It drove them into having to think. And same thing, Lucas went off and did Star Wars. The studio didn't want to do it. But then when he came to make the next 3 movies, he had an unlimited budget. He would walk into our studio. It was just before I bought it, but he'd walk in the studio, and all the technicians told me this. They'd have a set they're building, and he'd walk in with unlimited budget and go, I don't like that, I don't like that, I don't like that, and cost $250,000 in 8 minutes and make 3 unbelievably lackluster movies because he had no time of constraint, which is going to make us creative.
Yeah, it's constraints that build creativity. You know, one of my friends who's a billionaire, he's one of the very few billionaires who's had massive exit without any investment whatsoever. 1.3 billion exit, no other investors, just him and his brother. And because he was born in the wrong part of India and because he had the wrong kind of parents in India, there wasn't even a chance of getting funding. So they just had to figure shit out, and they had to come up with ways of getting people engaged, and they had to come up with competitions rather than marketing campaigns. And because of the constraints, it forced creativity into the team week in, week out. Yeah. And then because they were the most finely tuned company, they just exploded. And he ended up selling that company. He's a billionaire. Him and his brother are billionaires. And they just literally, he said, had we got investment, there's no way we would have gotten so creative.
Yeah. All right. Now we're talking about some very big, high concept things like, starting $1 trillion company or being a billionaire, and all that stuff's kind of fun. But what we're really also talking about is the people that are running their nice little $250,000 a year business, or their $1 or $2 or $3 million a year business. And I think that I really like the discussion we've had around what they can do to kind of start to protect themselves. Let's talk about this. What would you suggest for opportunity spotting? How do they activate themselves and their teams to be identifying the angel in the rock? And I'll give you my answer right now for how it drove for us and why we've been so nimble. We just listen to our clients a lot. Like when we started telling our clients that this event might get canceled, they're like, yeah, but we still want the education. So we're like, oh, all right. So we have to come up another way. What are some of the maybe sources of inspiration, techniques that you might ask small business owners to band together and do with each other to help them find the right opportunities?
I'll give you some strange opportunity. I'll give you a strange answer to this. The first thing is that you need to acknowledge this idea that you're already standing on a mountain of value. And there is a mountain underneath you of stories, case studies, insights, existing networks, customers, clients, product ideas. Already that is the mountain of value that you're standing on. As you know, when you're standing on a real life mountain, and you look out around you, you can see everything except the mountain. So the mountain below you looks like dirt. It looks pretty impressive from a distance, but it looks like dirt up close. Here's the thing about your own story. Your own story looks like dirt up close, and it's really impressive from a distance. One of the things that I see people do at this particular moment is they think, when they hear the word opportunity spotting, they go, oh, I got to become an Amazon drop shipper. I got to get into e-learning modules. I got to start doing machine learning, AI, etc. So I got to go run off and detune from my own mountain of value and tune into something that I know nothing about. If you're going to go off and do something that you currently know nothing about, you are at the back of the queue. You are 2 millionth in line to the front. And that is not going to change anytime soon. So if the only option for opportunity spotting is to look really closely at your own story and your own circumstances, anything that is emotional, whether it's high or low, that's a big part of your story. Whether it be painful, anything painful, there's valuable IP in pain. Anything pleasurable, there's valuable IP in pleasure. Anything you've achieved and won an award for, there's IP that went into that. Anything you're proud of, anything you're ashamed of, There's valuable IP lying all around all of that stuff. So you got to go digging into your own mountain of value, and you got to really pay attention. Don't let the reptile or the monkey brain take over at this moment and start buying dumb shit, because everyone's buying dumb shit all the time right now. I'm seeing 1,000 people signing on for how to sell pink kettles on Amazon. And it's like, you're not going to make it. You're not going to make.
That's about as useful as the extra toilet paper.
It's a moving bus. Like, by the time, it's just never going to happen. So the first opportunity spotting is in your heart and your head and your gut and your story and your past and in your phone and in your email messages and in the stuff that you can write. One of the best things you can possibly do is start writing. Write blogs, write articles, write about what you know. Write down your list of 7 mistakes not to make. Write down your list of 5 amazing things that speed up results regarding to X. Go mining for your insights and your intellectual property. Reconnect with the most high value people in your network that you've lost touch with and you haven't reached out to them. Reconnect with those people. That's your mountain of value. Someone that you were great friends with years ago and you just haven't spoken, reach out to them. Talk to that person who might mentor you. The number one thing that I say to people is there's no opportunity out there at all that's anywhere near as good as what's happening right under your nose.
I really like that so much, because what I often see people doing is exactly the opposite. They're looking for the opportunities externally. They're looking for the trends and going, I could get in on that trend. I'm like, well, what training do you have in that trend? What experience do you have? What contacts do you have? What resources do you have in that trend? Daniel, you were an Uber early adopter. And I know that because the very first time I saw Uber, I was with you. And you and I had lunch at some other club in Adam Street or somewhere in London. And then you were like, oh, my car is coming. And I was like, your car? And you go, yeah, my car. And I go, you have a private car? And you just looked at me and you went, yeah, more or less. And then you got in your car and went. And it was later that you revealed to me that this was Uber. I'll tell you something, that Uber is a good example of external versus internal opportunity spotting. Everybody should have spotted the opportunity of Uber. Everybody, anybody who's ever come out of an airport and couldn't get a taxi. Anybody who's ever come out of a conference in the rain and all the taxis were gone. Anybody should have sat there and went, there should be an app for that. And the problem is that anybody spotting that opportunity that didn't have some experience with coding or within their network have the experience of coding is behind everybody else that's spotting that opportunity too. Whereas somebody spotting that opportunity that has some background in coding or has a network that can support them on that, that's an internal opportunity.
I've got this amazing idea, but I don't want to tell anyone because they're not sure. If the only thing protecting the idea is that other people don't know about it, then it's a shit idea. The ideas that you make money from are the ideas that are so obviously linked to you that you could tell the whole world and they'd join your team. So like, for example, I just put together a funding round for a new startup which completed about 4 weeks ago. And we raised about £210,000. But the idea itself is something that me and my co-founder, we're the only ones that you'd want to back for this because we've been doing it 10 years accidentally, right? And when I show investors, this is where we came from. This is our first go at it. Here's our second go at it. Here's our third go of it. Here's where we got it right. And here's the 2.7 million we made in this other business as a result of having this technology. Then they go, okay, cool. So what are you going to do? Well, we're going to scale that technology and turn it into its own business. And it's like, well, cool. Thank you very much for sharing the idea and telling us how it works. But there's no one else we would get to do it because you guys have been doing it for 10 years and you know how to do it. What protects the idea is not that I'm guarded by the idea. What protects the idea is that it's the right idea for me.
But Daniel, there's another side to that too. And that is that ideas come into the ether in the exact same way that popcorn pops. And that is that one pops first, and then shortly after them, another one pops, and then another one and another one. So by the time you've had the idea, you don't know if you're the first kernel or the 8th, but there is going to come a point where everybody's starting to have the idea. And my favorite example of this was Michael Jackson talking about, he was having all these issues with sleep and stuff like that, as we know. And he's like, Michael, go to sleep. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. No. This song just came into my head. Go to sleep. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. No, I can't, because if I don't write it now, Prince might. And what I would say is when somebody comes to me and says, here's the thing. Somebody comes to me and has a really brilliant idea. I'm not going to take it. I'm going to either give them advice about it or I'm going to run with it with them. But if they don't tell me the idea and then I have the idea independently, I'm running with it. The
I know,
fact
but
is,
of course.
of course, you can't just go share your ideas randomly on Twitter. But when you're talking to somebody like me, you're talking to the credible people in your room that you're looking for mentorship. Holy cow. If you really feel sensitive about it, get an NDA, but you got to get help.
Yeah. And also anyone who's really good, who's going to help you, they're busy with their own ideas. No one's sitting around, stealing ideas.
Yeah, it happens to me all the time. People write to me on Instagram, come up to me after events and go, I've got this incredible idea. I really need your help with it. Okay, tell me about the idea. Well, I can't do that.
I can't tell you. I just need your help.
Okay, next.
I just need you to pitch it from stage.
That's it.
I don't know.
So, all right, boy, this is all such good stuff. I'm curious now about this exact issue. You guys have gone out and done a funding raise. You're going to launch this business and so on. I saw you talking about that. Now there are going to be people out there that are making decisions about, where to put money at the moment. Those people who have cash. Cash is absolutely king at the moment. Anybody who's sitting on any, you want to make sure you're taking care of your security, and B, you want to look around for the bargains. But what are your thoughts? Where would you be, aside from your own ventures, where would you be looking at investment in the current climate?
Yeah, so I think it's too late to sell anything, too early to buy anything. So right now, if you haven't sold out, then, transaction costs alone and the time and energy to worry about it, it's almost too late. And then it's too early to buy just yet. So when you look at past recessions, as far as big assets are concerned, most of the time they take a drop they're dropping and going sideways for about 18 months. So when you look at if you condense a 10-year chart of the FTSE and you see this massive drop down and you watch that line that seems to go just down like a stone, zoom in on it, it's 18 months. And it doesn't just turn around. It takes 5 or 6 years to get back to where it was. So I'm not in any rush to place any money, with one exception. I really believe that some great startups are going to come along in 2020 and 2021.
Yeah.
And realistically, placing small bets of £5,000 to £20,000 into a few different startups, backing founders, backing really quirky, geeked out, people who they're crazy passionate, they're innovative, they're into a thing, and they're just driving force of this thing. If you can find a few of those people, there's going to be some of those potentially looking at, if you've got, depending on what kind of money you've got, but becoming an LP into a venture fund now is actually not a bad time to be an LP in a venture fund. It was a terrible time from 2015 onwards because corporate had already figured out how to get in on all the opportunities. It was corporate venturing from 2015 to 2020 was where it was at. And there was no VC opportunities coming out. All the VC opportunities came post GFC, post crash. So my assumption is that there's going to be phenomenal, exciting, those kind of investments. Look, I believe the best place you're going to get the highest investment is in digital assets. Digital assets are essentially, here's what I think about when I think about digital assets. Digital assets have 3 superpowers. They transcend time and space. So if you upload something straight away, it's immediately everywhere in the world. So it transcends space. It's going to be lasting for 10 years, 100 years. Once it's a digital asset, it doesn't, it's going to be transcending time, and it transcends wear and tear. So you can play it 1 billion times and it still has the same level of quality.
Yeah.
And what's happening at the moment is that we're moving into this different universe, this different world, where those who have digital assets, those who control digital assets and who innovate digital assets are the ones who actually transcend time, space, and wear and tear. They're the ones that have something special about them. And people who are not invested in digital assets are actually getting eroded personally, professionally, energetically. So any investment into digital assets, the craziest thing with digital assets is that sometimes the investment could be as little as $2,000, and you could create a series of professional videos, and those professional videos do wonders for your career opportunities. Publishing a book can cost as little as £4,000 or £5,000 to work with a professional team who actually help you to create a good book. And that can be the thing that generates more opportunities for you in the next 5 to 10 years than anything else. You just send out 1,000 copies of the book every quarter and watch opportunities come flooding back to you. If it's a good book, if you've done it well. Investing in databases and enriching data and actually building your own database and actually having a way of interrogating your data more effectively. So this is what I mean when I talk about digital assets. There's the 24 assets that I mapped out. Any of those are going to provide great ROI. And some of them cost $1,000 to $2,000 to invest in. They'll generate 5, 10, 20,000 worth of return in the next 5 years. you know, massive uplift because they transcend time, space, and wear and tear. And if you're linked to that asset, you make a ton of money. Right now, this minute, you're recording this video. This video will transcend time, space, and wear and tear, and it will just add an extra dimension to your asset base. And people are not thinking about digital assets as assets. They're thinking about, oh, I've got to buy a £1 million 2-bedroom flat in London that pays 2% yield. And it's like, that boat has sailed. So now you sit there and think the thing that will make you more millions than anything else is very wise investments into digital assets, building a digital landscape around you.
Daniel, I'm so on board with you. Maybe 6 years ago, I went through a big personal reinvention thing. We had bought that movie studio you're talking about. We started a military training company. We ended up selling that. And I found myself kind of in this reinvention mode. I made the decision at that point to move into education because that been my passion for years. One of the things that I'm known, I'm comfortable on stage and I deliver well on stage and that kind of stuff. So I believed that that was my asset. But I realized afterward that really what the asset, there were a couple of other things that were the asset. It was the information and the style of delivery, not necessarily the fact that it was live on the stage. And so I started taking a look at that aspect of my life and my business. And we then started moving our programs into digital. And we created our first Business Freedom Challenge. It was a 90-day coaching program. And it was phenomenally successful. Our clients were completing it. And then when WildFit took off, and it was a hobby, it was a hobby. And here's the irony. If it had not been a hobby, if it had been a passion project, that whole thing has been a passion project of mine since I was 20. But if I believed it to have been a business, I would have been more inclined to be out on the road, speaking, trying to coach people personally. But because it was just an adjunct hobby alongside our main business education business, I was forced to digitize it because I didn't have time for it. And so we ended up digitizing it just to get it out of the way. And then about a year later, our accounts review comes up, and Elise, who's my wife and our CFO, she comes up to me and she says, WildFit was more profitable last year than Business Freedom. And I said, what? It's a hobby. And she goes, yeah, we spend no money on it. We do no advertising, no marketing, but it was exactly what you've described. It transcends space and time. There's no wear and tear. And the results that it creates for people cause self-propagation. Yeah. And so it just got, and now we're talking about, no kidding, 20,000 people in 130 countries have done that program in the last 5 years. It's phenomenal. And that's because of digital assets.
Here's the crazy thing. If you think about how much, think about the profit of WildFit per year now, and think about how much real estate you would need to own to get that.
And have to maintain it and have the wear and tear. So here's an interesting thing, by the way. There's a process, this is kind of crazy. It's important that people recognize, just like you said about the book, it's got to be good. So does the digital asset. It does have to be good.
It's got to be an asset. You got to think of it like an asset. If I was creating a house, I'm not going to rock up on a piece of land that I don't even own, right? Such as someone else's platform, and just simply throw together some cardboard boxes and see if I can rent it out. You've got to have the same commitment. For example, when I create digital assets, I work with award-winning suppliers. A film production company is an award-winning film production company. When I build e-learning, I work with a great agency who have won awards for e-learning. Now, I'm not saying that we spend crazy amounts of money, but to me, they love what they do well enough to enter for awards and win awards. And I'm happy to pay a bit of a premium because you're paying for a team who's passionate to build the right quality of asset. They're not going to build something that was popular 3 years ago. They're going to build something that is cutting edge.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've done a great job of that. I know that back in I think last year you were awarded as being a top business advisor for leadership and management in the UK. Nobody told them that you're some Australian dude who arrived with $5,000 on a credit card when I first met you. Nobody mentioned that detail to them. And then, of course, your books have gone on to be major bestsellers. And that has a lot to do with your commitment to that. You've done a lot in the last 10 years. It's impressive.
Thanks. Let's see how it goes in the next 10.
Yeah, well, there we go. One of the things that we're working on in the digital asset space is that our completion rates are off the charts. We have something like an 85% completion rate on WildFit, which is a diet program for 3 months of digital content. It's that's world class. Most digital programs have a 10 to 15% if they're doing really well. And what's been happening is our clients have been asking us a lot what our construct for that is. We've now 2 years in a row been the highest rated program on the Mindvalley platform. And so one of the things that I sat and talked with my team about is of all our network that's out there, what do they really need? And funny enough, just in line with our conversation, they need to learn how to build digital assets. And so we're going to do a totally free workshop on how to build digital programs in the next week or two. I'll let you know when we've got it going on.
It's really important that they learn from you, because there's everyone obsesses about the tools, and they go, oh, do you use Kajabi, or do you use Infusionsoft, or do you use ActiveCampaign? And no one says, what tonality do you use in your voice to get people to take action? Having seen what you do with WildFit, a huge part of it is that you command people to take the next step, and you joke at the right time, and you enroll people in the vision that you need them to be enrolled in. But the other thing you do is you create this done with you environment where you're part of a group, and they're holding you accountable, and there's a coach who's making sure everyone's doing the work and everyone's logging in. One thing I see a lot of people do is they stick some content on a Kajabi platform and say, there you go, guys, buy this and don't bother me. And there's no accountability. There's no property manager. Whereas what you've done is you really, truly, you've found a way of making it doesn't feel like an online program. Now, this is a really important thing. You don't want to create anything that feels like it's online.
Yeah.
It needs to feel like it's in your life.
Yeah.
For me, if I'm doing WildFit, I'm not doing an online program. I'm doing it in the real world program, right? I'm eating differently. I'm moving differently. I'm drinking differently. So even the terminology, online program or online thing, that's how the entrepreneur thinks about it. It's not how the customer thinks about it.
That's right.
And that's a powerful distinction.
Daniel, I was in this airport, I don't know, about 4 or 5 months ago. And there's this woman sitting there wearing a hat, reading a book, and her kid's playing. And Zoe joins in and starts playing with her as well. This is actually in the Tallinn airport in Estonia. And then the woman is like reading, and then suddenly she looks up under the brim of the hat, and she looks at me and she goes, "It's you." And I'm like, "Yes, it's me. I don't know what that means." And she goes, No, you're the reason we bought a TV so they could watch WildFit on the big screen instead of on their laptop. But the point is that they felt like I was there. Like, people walk up to me in airports all over the world, malls, and they walk up to me like I know them. And I think that should be the objective anybody has when they're creating a digital product, is that the people that are watching it feel that connected with them.
Yeah.
Well, Daniel, I got to tell you, it's always a pleasure to spend time with you. I am now very mindful of the fact that we've not spent nearly enough time together over the last couple of years, and we've been on different islands and different travel schedules.
I feel like I bought a big television just to watch you.
Well, I just want to say thank you for being here and for doing what you're doing and stimulating positivity. There are a lot of fear mongers out there. We got to remember the news media is selling clicks. They want you to click, and they're going to freak you out. They're going to publish the article that says 21-year-old man died of coronavirus. When you read the article, it turns out that he was incredibly sick already. So be in mind that they're there to frighten you. And people like Daniel are here to inspire you. And I hope you've got some inspiration today, Daniel. I'm certain they did. Thank you so much. Tell me one thing before we go. You've got a number of really good books out there, but if you were going to name one of your books that somebody needs to read today because of the current circumstances, which book is that?
So if you're really, truly just starting out as an entrepreneur, read Entrepreneur Revolution, because it's written about my story of starting post 2000 recession. I started as an entrepreneur 2001, 2002, and it was really, there weren't lots of jobs for people my age at that time, and I ended up in business and I ended up an entrepreneur as a result. But it actually tracks my path from 0 to about 11 million in revenue in 3.5 years. So it was a really fast growth story, and it talks about all the key things around that. If you've already got a business and you're already up and running and you already have an entrepreneur mindset, then 24 Assets is all about digital assets, digital investing, digital campaigning. So it's about having all those digital assets. I know you said one thing, but I picked two.
Well, that's perfect, because when somebody tells you that you've only got one thing, I don't want you to just give them the one thing. This is a time for helping people, taking advantage of the opportunities when you can. And you're doing a great job of it all. Daniel, again, thanks very much.
Cheers. Bye.
Okay, so we're clear. And we've just put the link out so that people will be joining us. It'll take a minute for that to happen, but people will join in, and now it'll come a little like boardroom meeting, and we'll see what kind of questions or interaction comes up. This is either a 5-minute exercise, because not a lot of people join in, or it can go a little crazy, but we won't let it go longer than about 25 minutes or so. Cool. Harry, I wish we could give out badges, because Harry was the first one to catch on that we were opening up the live channel, and he's been on everyone. And Harry, do you have a question to prime us off here? I think it's going to be a tradition. Harry gets the first question.
Entrepreneur vibe in Estonia.
I tell you, it is a serious entrepreneur. I'm an e-resident of Estonia. I'm a partner in a business there. We do huge programs there. And it's funny, because the first time I went there, my good friend Roland said to me, I got to bring you to Estonia one day. And I consider myself fairly geographically aware, compared to, say, some of the people out there. But I was like, okay, where's Estonia? Tell me. I've been going back there ever since, and I absolutely love visiting. Harry, you are live. What's your question?
Hi. Now I can. My question would but for we're talking about a million and quarter million companies, but or trillion companies, but small companies, like you said that if there's 10 people, you should cut down to 4 and stuff like that. But do you think, in general, is that lasting that long, or should it be for better relationships to keep people on and weather the storm for a couple of months, or do you think it will be a longer ride that we should embrace for it more?
It's not going to be a couple of months. I could imagine us being on lockdown for a couple of months. And if you think about this, a recession is negative growth for 2 quarters in a row. Negative growth can actually be 0.5% or 1% is a recession, right? If you have 1% drop in economic growth, you're in recession territory. If you think about it in time, 1% of the year is 3.5 days. And all you would need to do is disrupt an economy for 3.5, 4 days, and you would actually have a 1% dip in the economy. If you disrupt an economy for a whole week, you're actually disrupting, a couple of percentage points off the economy. That's a recession. An actual definition of a recession is just negative growth 2 quarters in a row. It could be as little as a few days of disruption. Now, the issue is that we're going to be in massive disruption, biological, social, political, all of that. Plus we're going to expose debt. And not only that, by the way, if it wasn't for coronavirus, world news right now would be the fact that oil has dropped 70% of its value, and that impacts hundreds of thousands of jobs, millions of jobs. So we are not going to have a little savage couple of months. Economically, we are going to be in the fight of our lives as a big picture economically. I feel torn because part of me is I'm an entrepreneur, I'll be fine. I see the opportunity in this. But I've got friends and family who aren't, and I've got friends and family who are in different parts of the country. I know that they're going to be in the fight of their life economically for a year, maybe 2 years. Here's the thing I'll tell you. Stock markets are not reactionary. They're predictive. So when you see a stock market drop, it's not because of something that happened. It's because of something investors think will happen. When you see the stock market go like that, it's because the prediction for the coming 2 quarters is very negative. Now, if investors think that a company that's not profitable will become highly profitable, like Tesla, they don't care. They'll invest in an unprofitable company because of where they predict it will go. If there's a profitable company that they think will go unprofitable, like General Motors, they will take their money out of that because of where they think it will go. So stock markets are not reactionary, they're predictive. Now, what we're seeing all over the world is the stock markets have dropped, the biggest drops in all of history, 10-year lows. And what they're essentially saying is that we predict that we will go back to the same sort of economic activity as 10 years ago. That's the prediction. So and stock markets never, ever go down, up. Not the way that they've just done. They don't drop 10, 20, 30% and then just go back up 10, 20, 30%. Here's the other very difficult thing with large corporates. Large corporates, when the stock market goes down, they fire everyone and they cut everything back. Only when the stock market starts to rise do they get fear of missing out and they start hiring people. So what happens is the stock market goes like this, then there's 3 months of nothing happens because corporates are trying to figure out who to fire. And then they fire everyone 3 months later. And then they go sideways for 18 months. And then only after the stock market starts to rise do they then rehire people. And that's why you should be an entrepreneur. But the corporates, they don't work like that. The broader picture economically is not going to be pretty for the next 18 months at least. Sorry.
I tend to agree with all of that. I've really noticed that in this whole thing, there's this weird spectrum of denial at one end and hysteria at the other end. And then the weird thing about that spectrum is that what was hysterical one week is not hysterical the next week. I shared this story on the interview this morning, but it's like, I was having a chat with a buddy of mine in Austin who's friends with Tim Ferriss. And I said, look, do me a favor. I'd love to talk with Tim. I want to get on his podcast and talk about my last trip with the Bushmen. And he goes, yeah, Tim's not talking to anybody right now. He's holed up in his compound hiding from coronavirus. This is 4 weeks ago. I was like, what a nut bar he is. Because of course he's on the hysterical end of the spectrum and I'm on the denial end. And of course, about 2.5 days later, I joined the hysterical end, which made me hysterical because nobody believed me. I was talking to my team. I was telling them even then that I thought that our events in June would end up getting canceled, and it seemed reactionary. It seemed, but I am with you. I think that America will release first, and they have a robust healthcare system that might be able to deal with the fallout of that. But I think we're minimally talking on average around the world of a 6 to 8 week lockdown. Yeah.
So with all of these medical, like if you look at all of the pandemics, there's an initial spike and then there's a reaction and gets under control. And then the following winter, it's back with a vengeance. So it would not at all surprise me if we spend from Halloween to Christmas, New Year on lockdown again because of the spike that will happen post-fall, early winter.
You know what's crazy, Daniel? Any of the steps that any of us would take to prepare for that possibility are awesome steps to take, even if it doesn't happen. You know, that's the beauty of it. But I'm with you. The Spanish flu did that. Disappeared over the summer. October, boom, it's back with a vengeance. The metaphor that I came up with about that this morning is in the old days when we didn't really understand hurricanes, a hurricane would come, everybody prepare for it. The storm was coming, they buckle down, and then the eye would pass over them and they'd think it's over. And they would go back to their normal lives. And they would go to the beach and everything would be fine because they thought it was over. And then the other wall, when a hurricane first comes to you, it comes slowly. The edge of the storm comes to you. But when you're in the eye and the other wall hits you, you literally go from no movement of air to like 100-mile-an-hour winds in a second. Many people were killed by that because they thought it was all over. And I think that what we need to be taking a look at is that this is not a one-off thing. This is a new economy and a new world, and it's going to be with us for a couple of years. So we need to be thinking constantly about how to build our businesses and make them robust to get us through this stuff. Great distinctions, Daniel. Thank you. Great question, Harry. Who else? Anybody? Michelle, I know I can count on you. Michelle, she comes from your part of the world, small offshoot island, mind you, but from your part of the world, Daniel. Michelle, you're up.
Oh, hi, Eric.
I'm sorry. Are you going to need a translator or are you going to be okay?
Eric doesn't speak Kiwi very well. I'm just wondering, I totally agree with what you're saying about the second wave. I think people are unrealistic. In New Zealand, we've gone down into lockdown and they are thinking it's like a 4-week sort of thing. And I mean, we're looking at December, I think, easily and then beyond. And so it's about making your businesses resilient to those sorts of things. And the sort of first responders, the people that are out there, the essential services and things. I mean, here we've got police, we've got nurses, we've got doctors, and I mean, who would have thought that, you know, young teenagers working in supermarkets are going to be on that line as well? For me, I've been ringing around just talking about hygiene practices and what they can be doing when they're transferring to work and from work, and just, you know, how to make sure that they're having the right hygiene practices of, you know, making sure when they're dealing with infectious diseases, how to make sure that doesn't come back to the home. But have you got any other advice for those people on sort of that front line?
Unfortunately not. I know a lot about a very few number of things and all of them relate to entrepreneurship. So I can talk for days about the entrepreneurial side of things. All I can really say about first responders is I'm just really grateful for their service. I'm an investor in a company that does training for police officers, and we work on soft skills training for police officers who are exiting the force, and a lot of them are actually, they've just exited, now they're going back in. And you know, it's just one of those things. I think all of us have an obligation to really find a way to help someone who's a medical professional or a police officer or something. You know, find a way to use your business as a way to fundraise or to do pro bono work for those kind of people. One of the things I'm really big on is I really think that every business has capacity to do more good in the world. And it could be through pro bono, it could be through buy one, give one, it could be through using your influence to raise funding. So look, the only angle that I can come at that question from is I think every entrepreneur, especially if you've found a way through the storm, should find a way to assist someone who's working crazy hours in the medical profession. For me personally, I know a couple of GPs. I know 3 really well. I reached out to all 3 of them. I said, if there's, in the coming weeks, if there's anything at all I can do, in the middle of the night, you need me to drive and pick you up something or drop something off. If there's anything I can do, if I can do your shopping, your groceries, like just let me know and I'll do it. I know you're going to be under so much pressure in the next coming weeks. So I just think if everyone could reach out to someone they know who's in that first responder position and just help them.
Yeah, I want to pick that up as well, Michelle. I mean, you know, I think the very first thing that we should be thinking about anybody, like one of the guests that we've had on the show is Dr. Ara, and he is on the front line in the hospitals. He's a surgeon. He's working in the ER. facing the reality of probably getting exposed and dealing with all that stuff. And I think that the first thing we should have is absolute gratitude that there are people out there that were called to take on jobs like that, that they were called to want to serve in that way. And I think that we all owe them a debt of gratitude. Daniel, I love what you said. I think any of you who know people like that, if you can arrange some kind of, I don't know what it is, I got to tell you, they're probably a bit tired to have to come home and cook since they can't, if there's something you can do to support them in any way, that might be great. What I would suggest is that one of the things that they could be looking at when this is all over is that many of them are going to have stories that need to be told. Many of them are going to have stories that will be impactful and valuable, both from a inspirational Hallmark Channel type TV movie thing of the things they did, or from an educational perspective in a corporate environment where we had a real discussion about how this could have been handled. Because I'll tell you, there are many people on the front lines that knew what was going on early and we're having a hard time getting the government to act fast enough in many countries. And so I think that there are going to be opportunities born for them when this is all over. What I would inspire all of them to do with whatever energy they've got left after serving all of us is journal their experience, really pay attention to what they've lived through, so that their stories can be told either from an entertainment perspective or an empowerment perspective, or from a education consulting perspective. Right now, what's his name? Chris Voss was an FBI negotiator for all those years. I mean, how is he going to make the transition into entrepreneurship? Well, you know what he did? He wrote a book on negotiating because that's what he understood. And he wrote a fabulous book and he invested in becoming a great speaker. He's a great storyteller and he turned that into a really exciting business. And I think that many of the first responders are going to come out of this experience with knowledge, ideas, contacts, and stories that will be valuable to us in the rest of the world. So that's my take on that answer. I'm going to go over to Audrey. Audrey, let me just get you unmuted. There you go. You are live with Daniel. Audrey, go ahead.
Okay, so I was just trying to find out what kind of questions people can ask themselves to get them pointed more into the entrepreneurial direction. I run a general contracting and design business for residential, do a lot of affordable housing, love coming up with ideas. I try to move the trade into a better direction, better materials, more efficient, but I have trouble getting the ideas or the questions to ask myself to get out of this hourly, physical, making it happen trade into the entrepreneurial side. How do you get your brain to kind of switch directions? What do you ask? Where would you start?
Yeah, cool. So what I'm looking for when I look for a good concept, a good business idea, I look for three things. I look for something that you're passionate about. When I look for passion, I just purely and simply, do you buy books on it and do you finish those books? Or do you watch long YouTube videos about it? If you watch long YouTube videos about it, if you buy books about it and finish reading them, then that's a passion. That's as simple as it is for me. Most people can confuse passions and hobbies. They go, like for me, I would say, oh, my passion's snowboarding. My hobby is snowboarding. Do you have genuine passion about it? Could you write 20,000 words about the topic? If you could write 20,000 words about the topic, it's probably a passion. The next one is, can you identify a problem that needs solving? This has to overlap with the passion. Can you find a problem that needs solving? And then the third challenge is, can you find people willing to pay? And there's a magical number. In the UK, the number is £85,000 per year. And if you can generate £85,000 worth of people willing to pay, it could be that you collect pre-orders or you just get sign-ups, or that you run a campaign and you get 50 sales and it adds up to 85,000, or it could be that you do it month in, month out and it adds up to 85,000 in the year. If it hits 85,000 in the year, it's the marketplace giving you a signal, and maybe that's about 100,000 US. It's the marketplace giving you a signal that there's a business in this, there's a potential business. And the moment that things change, Audrey, is when you have a small team around you. So the magical moment, people say, how do I get, how do I work on the business, not in the business? Well, the key is that if you're the only person in the business, there is no working on the business and in the business, you're the business. So you go, oh, I need to work on the business. Great. Use the weekend, right? Use the evening. And then it feels very exhausting. As soon as you've got a salesperson, as soon as you've got a delivery person, as soon as you've got someone supporting your admin, all of those kind of things, those people are working in the business, and that frees up a little bit of time for you to work on the business. So the magic happens when there's teams of, essentially teams of 2 getting it started, teams of 4, getting that money going, teams of 8. When you hit about a team of 8, that's where you actually get the opportunity to work on the business, not in the business. And you really take on the vital role, not the functional role. So you're trying to work your way up to having a bit of a team. Sometimes people have asked me, how did I start so many companies and how did I get past being a one-person business? How did I get past the point of it just being me? The truth is, I've never ever been alone. There's not been one business I've ever done where I didn't have a team on day one. So my approach has always been that I collect 3, 4, 5 people around me, including myself, and we sit down and we talk until we feel confident that we can make sales. We come up with slide presentations and brochure ideas, and we sit there with whiteboards. And sometimes this is late at night or over the weekend. Sometimes it's early morning. Sometimes we go for long walks and talk. But there comes a point where we all go, you know what, we should do this. This is ready. Like, we could go out and run a campaign around this and do this. And we work together as that little team. And suddenly, in most cases, my businesses have always made normally at least 100,000 a month, pretty much from launch. And I've done several businesses where we hit $1 million in the first year, very quickly. And you can never, ever do that on your own. It's only ever when you have a team who kind of have defined roles. Someone's purely focused on the marketing and the sales. Someone's really focused on the customer experience. Someone's focused on the admin. And they're all kind of working together until they feel confident that, yeah, we should do this. That's kind of how it should feel to start a business.
That's it. Forget the beer mat entrepreneur with Mike Southern. We're going after the bank robbery entrepreneur.
That's it. That's how it should feel like that.
Daniel, it's funny. I almost crashed in on you because when you started asking the question about how do you have a team and put the team together, I had this immediate awareness of, I've never seen you without a bit of a team around you. You are very good at having a posse of reliable people, many of which have gone on to become entrepreneurs in their own right, building incredible things. And then you assemble another team. I think that's really valuable. And going right back to you with 24 assets and digital assets, one of the things that people don't really understand about a digital asset is that a digital product replaces the need for delivery for that particular thing. So for example, in the case of WildFit, what happened, we went through exactly the cycle you're talking about. It was a passion. I could easily write 20,000 words a day on my passion around food and food psychology. I was passionate and already writing, even though I had no plan for it. So I had the passion, but then slowly I had a bit of a team around me. And the funny thing is, I had that team around me because of a different business, but the team got caught up in the passion of that business. And exactly what you described happened is that it just started off being roughly 100,000 a year, just a hobby little business. And then when we realized we were onto something and we'd properly built the digital platforms, that's when it literally went from 100 clients a year to 2,000 clients the next year. Like that, it just exploded. And by the way, we're watching that again right now, because when we started asking people, wow, you're still buying even though the economic times are uncertain, here's the answer they're giving. I want to be healthy. Never before have I wanted to turn my type 2 diabetes around as badly as I do now. Never before have I wanted to end my obesity. Nope, that's not what's going on. In Italy, it seemed that way because their population is very old. In America, the statistics are scary. A lot of young people are ending up in the hospital. Why? Well, I wouldn't want to out any particular brands here, but there are companies that are selling irresponsible soda drinks made in Atlanta, Georgia, and fast food chains based in Anaheim. But the fact is that now people are telling us, oh, I really need to take responsibility for my health, because it's no longer an esoteric, long-term existential problem. It's an immediate threat that if I am type 2 right now, if I'm obese right now, if I have inflammation right now, I'm susceptible. And so because we have digital assets, we can be ready for that, because one of the members of our team doesn't have to be coaching all those people.
Yeah.
Daniel, you've got good stuff every day.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of A Wilder Life. Please leave a review and share it. A Wilder Life with Eric Edmeades.